already went over before choosing a rig. So this is the Morpheus rig.
That thing you were talking about choosing the rig, that video, the audio doesn't work on here.
Can you read my lips? I'll load the old one. It's the same thing, you're just finding a rig. Okay. That's weird.
Yeah, I noticed that last weekend the audio wouldn't work.
Alright. So eventually you'll pick a rig, and then you have to use that rig for all the stuff that you're going to be working on for the rest of the semester. So we got about 5 weeks left, and we have poses, walk cycle, animation, and pickup that we have to fit within those 5 weeks. So not a whole lot of time. So don't spend hours looking for a rig. If anything, use the Morpheus one, use the Andy rig, use the Homer Simpson rig is pretty good too. And then there's a reason that I say things. It's not because I'm trying to give you extra work. It's because I'm trying to save you on work, okay? So the next steps of this, people ignore, and then every time they go to render their stuff out, they have to redo it all, okay? So don't ignore these steps. Number one, we need to retexture our character. No matter which item you get, rig you get, that rig is not going to be textured in the renderer that you're using. This one here, no matter how many lights I throw into the scene, this is Arnold I'm using. I'll throw a sky dome in here. I'll render this out. That's what he's going to look like. Now, when I do my poses, I have to check this out. There's something weird happening right there. I don't know if that's a reflection or what it is. If I do my poses, my walk cycle, my animation, all that stuff, I want to have a rig set up to use at the start of each of those. So I don't want to have to go through and do every one of my poses. This happens. People do a pose, and then they do the next pose, and then they do the next pose, and then for some reason they just jump right to the walk cycle, and they haven't ever rendered their stuff out. They go back to render, and it looks like this. And they have to go back and retexture every single one of those characters that they have. So if we set it up now, make sure it looks good now, we don't have to do that later. It makes sense to me, at least. All right, so, oh, there it is. What is that? I don't know what that is. Let me reopen the Morpheus rig. I didn't touch it. I don't know what that is. And this is some of the stuff you get when you open files from older programs. It's still there. Let's move that over. No, that's still there. Move this. Sometimes it's just a glitch. Sometimes it actually is there. Sometimes it's just a piece of geometry that they use for something. Oh, I know what it is. It's his tongue. So I find his tongue somewhere in the list. Nose, cheek, jawline. Maybe this is tongue or something. Nope, that's neck skinny. Maybe something over here is tongue. And this is what one of the reasons we want to check this out, because if this is something we can't control, that's his cheek, then we need to address that right away so that we don't spend hours doing this. That's his mouth. Alright, I'm not sure where his tongue is. Every one of them, yep. So just like you have your Morpheus rig there, right? Isn't that hilarious? I'm using Morpheus, I'm using Morpheus. It's completely the same thing. You just want to have controls for everything. Alright, I don't know where that's coming from. That looks like his mouth. Yes. And that's his mouth control. Yeah, but it's definitely moving that. I don't know where that tongue is coming from. Alright, so I'm going to ignore this rig. I'm not going to use this rig because something right away off the bat is not working out with it. So I have my Mr. Manhattan project one. I can set my project to that and open him up. See how quickly I realized this one sucks and then I moved on to the next one? That's what you want to do. There you go, Patty. There we go. Okay, so same situation. I add an area light in here for Arnold. I hit the render button. And I see what he's going to look like. Boom. That's what he looks like. Let me take this up more. I know it's not going to work, but just so you guys can see it. 10 and 10. There we go. So he's still not really lighting up as much as we would hope he would light up. Oh, I added an area light. Sky dome. There we go. There you go. He is actually, that's a lot better than I was expecting. There's a green little weird thing on him, obviously. I don't know. It's a digital hula hoop, I think. Oh, it's this. It's that box. So these items typically are things that are on layers, and then we'll just hide them when we actually render it. So that's not a huge deal. Now I do want to check before I get any further. I want to see what kind of geometry this is, or what kind of materials are already on him. So if I go to my shader, my hypershade, and I look at these, you're going to see in here most of the time they're either using Mental Ray, they're using RenderMan, they're using Arnold, they're using some random one that you've never heard of before. We want to fix it so that we are using a consistent one. If we don't pick a right shader, then the coloring isn't going to be right. Okay, the lights won't react correctly with our character. So every single one of these is a default Maya one, which is going to look pretty much not horrible, but not as good as it can look by using an Arnold shader. Okay, so all of these ones here, those ones are the controllers, it looks like, in this one. They might not be. I may need to tweak it, but that's what they're looking like. This one here is something. I'm not sure what it is. We'll figure it out. And then these ones are something also. This one isn't labeled for some reason, but these ones are. So this is his body. This one is his eyes. This one is his pants. Not wearing any pants. There's his teeth. There's his tongue. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to remake all of these shaders. Now the process for this isn't as difficult as it seems. It's actually pretty straightforward. So first thing I want to do is right click on, I'm going to start off at the top left one. I'm going to right click and say select object with material. And what that does is it goes through Maya and it picks everything with that material. Now when I did that, you'll notice that nothing got selected. If I go to my move tool, nothing's selected. I'll verify it again just to make sure I don't accidentally delete something I need. Nothing's selected. Okay, so chances are this was actually a mistake that they just left in there. I can verify that by going to edit, delete, unused. Yep, and it goes away. So they accidentally added a blend, or I did. I don't think I did. I'm pretty perfect, so. Why are you guys laughing at it? All right, I'm going to go to the next one. So I'm going to ignore these ones because these are all the controls. You see how it says CTRL, so I'm assuming those are the controls. So I'm going to go to this one and select an object, and that selects his body. So then I'm going to go to, oops. Yep. So I have to assign a brand new material to him, and this is going to be a AI standard surface, just like we've done before. Now here's the trick part, is that I need to make sure I obviously label it the same thing. So this is his body, and I need to make sure that whatever connections were done on the one are now done on mine. Okay, so if they created a file and dropped it onto the color, I need to create a file and drop it onto color. And the only way I figure that out is I'm going to copy this tab. That way it sticks out like this so I don't lose it. And I'm going to click on that material that I just selected. Now you'll notice this arrow here, this arrow here, this arrow here. Those are all spots they've connected stuff to the Mr. Manhattan body shader. Now to get to them, I'm just going to close that. I'm going to click on this material, click on the double arrows, and this will show you all the stuff and how it's connected. So here's his bump. So I'm going to scroll down to the advanced tab. Oops, sorry, geometry tab. Geometry tab. And I'm just going to middle drag the bump onto this bump. Done. Here's the color. So I'm just going to scroll up. I'm going to middle drag this onto color. And then this one is actually ambient. There isn't an ambient. I don't believe anyway. Maybe matte, I guess, would be considered an ambient in this one. No, it wouldn't. No. Yeah, there's nothing in here that's going to be ambient. So I'm just going to actually just leave that alone. I'm not even going to use this one here. Okay? So the body one is done. That's all I had to do. I selected the objects, I assigned the new material, and then I reloaded all those things. I may still need to go through, and if I render this out, he may be super reflective. No, it's not bad. He's a little bit reflective, but not too much. Okay, so I can take his roughness up. I can take his specular weight down. And that will help kind of soften the effect of it. So by default, the Arnold shader is super reflective and super shiny. You can see there's a subtle change right there. Okay. Sweet. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing to the next one. So I'm going to go to Mr. Manhattan Eyes. I'm going to right click and select the objects. This grabs the eyes. I'm going to add a new material. AI standard surface. Eyes. There we go. I'm going to copy the tab so I don't lose it. Because once I click, that's when I lose it. So I'm going to go to the eyes. I'm going to click the arrows. And luckily for us, he doesn't have any texture for the eyes. Some of the rigs, like the Andy rig, he has textures for each of his eyes. I would middle mouse button drop those textures just like I did the skin onto the color of the eyes. His eyes are completely white. So I'm going to pull that weight up here, and I'm going to pull, that should be pretty white. That is white. Oh, it's coming out gray. That's one, that's one. Yeah, that should be white. We'll see if it's not white later. We'll figure that out. Looks like it's white. Yeah, those are white. That's good. Okay. All right, so now we'll go to the next one. And you can see this process does not take long, but when you don't do it initially, and then you have to do it to all three of your poses, then your walk cycle, then everything else, forget it. This one is his pants. Again, oh. Those aren't pants. Assign a new material. Come on. Assign new material. There we go. Standard surface. Pants. This is most likely going to be just another color, not an actual material, but we'll see. We will copy the tab so we don't lose it. It's not a huge deal if you lose it. We just grab it back again. So we do have something here, which is a bump. So I'm going to scroll down to my geometry. I'm going to middle drag this onto my bump mapping. Make sure you drag it onto the word, not the spot here. If you drag it just to that spot, it's stupid. It copies the name, but it doesn't actually connect it to anything until you hit enter. Yeah, it is stupid. Yeah. So just drag it to the name, and then you don't have to worry about it. Same thing. I'm going to take the roughness up. I'm going to take my specular down. I'm going to give him a different color. This is where we can get creative. Let's say he's at the pool, right? We can drop in a leopard print and just put that as his color of his pants. That was a joke. You guys are horrible at jokes. Yeah. See, that you laugh at. When I'm complimenting myself, you laugh all the time. All right, there we go. Let's go to teeth, select the object, same thing, new material.
So do we have to do this every time we reload our materials?
Nope, this is the first time. Like, you're ready, you picked your rig and you're ready to go and start posing him. This is what we want to do first step. That way, every time we use him, he's going to be all set to go, as long as we follow what our instructor has told us to do. Teeth, copy tab, go to teeth, graph it out. Body color, I middle drag to color. Glow, and you can check to see what it's connected to. This one says glow, it's connected to ambient color. There is no ambient color for an Arnold, so just ignore it. I don't know why his teeth would be so glistening, but whatever. I'm going to pull the weight of this up. I'm going to pull his specularity down and his roughness up some. Actually, his teeth could be a little bit less rough and a little bit more shiny. Okay. So that's good. That's good. All right, so teeth are done. And then this is his tongue, so I'll select the material. Copy the tab. Go to that. Go to the arrows. Oh, cow. His tongue has a lot of them. All right. So same thing. Body color goes there. Bump goes down on bump. Advanced. Oops. Geometry. And the glow is that. Okay, sweet.
We're applying like the bump and all that. We're not reloading the bump. We're applying the bump to the object.
Yep, the same one that they already have. We're just dropping it on there. We might need to tweak it. You might need to adjust it, but you'll see it before you get too far into it.
Get the rig, it'll have all that bumping information on there.
It could.
Apply it.
Yeah, it could. It depends on the rig that you pick. So if you get the generic rig, if I can spell rig, this one here is super simple. There's no bump. He's literally just the color blue. So when you go into your material for him, he's going to have blue for his skin tone. He'll have white for his eyes and black for his pupils. That's it. So he won't have any files attached to it. When you get to the Andy rig, Andy has one file for his entire clothing. His teeth are on a separate one, and his eyes, I think, are on a separate one too. But each outfit that he wears has a separate clothing thing. I'll show that one just so you can see it. Because that one, you click the button, and it's like, holy cow. Sweet. So now if I render this, just to test it out, make sure he's still looking good. It's going to convert all those files to Arnold text files. All right, that works. Okay, cool. You could also, because these are texture files, you could also go into Photoshop and you could put, pictures on there too. Like if you want to put a tattoo on him, boom, it's a texture. You can go in there and put a tattoo on him. You can cover him up if you want to also. All right, sweet. So that's him. Let me go and save this as. I'm going to call this Mr. Manhattan Materials Done. Yes, it gives me an error. Sometimes it will give you an error because I tried to save this as an MB. It wants to be saved as an MA. It was originally an MA, and it wants to stay an MA. So whatever. Materials. There we go. Okay. Now, to test to make sure that all of our materials are done, we're going to do that delete unused nodes again. So I go back to the hypershade. All of these random ones that they created should not be needed anymore. So when I go to delete unused, all we should have left are these stand-in ones, which is what's left, and our materials: tongue, teeth, body, eyes, pants. Shader glow, particle, and Lambert 1 are defaults. You will not delete those. Those won't go away. Just ignore them. Okay? So these items are always there. Perfect. All right, so now that gets us to the materials are all set. Okay? Now what we have to do is set up our character sets. So you know how when we animated the bouncing ball, we animated just the translate Y moving up and down. Then we animated the translate Z or X. Then we animated rotation. Then we animated squashing, right? With our character, we are going to be animating 50 things at once, okay? So we want to make sure that we don't accidentally forget to key something. So we want to make basically this character set that houses every single thing we want to key. And that way when we hit S to set a key, it sets keys on every single thing inside this bunch. So when we get him into a certain pose, we hit S, we put him in another pose, we hit S, and that will translate from one pose to the other, okay? Again, something we want to make sure it's set up before we get to that next stage. So down here at the bottom, you can see where it says None Character Set Editor. You want to make sure that your character doesn't already have a set. Andy has a set. It would list it here. In the outliner, it would also say, I think it just says Andy or Andy Rig. You would click on it, and then you would hit delete, and then it would show Andy upper body and something else. You would delete that. I'll again show that before I finish up. If I don't, remind me, and then I'll show it. You want to delete those. So now I want to make my own character sets. So I'm going to go to Animation. I'm going to go to Create Character Set, and you call this whatever you want. So I'm going to call this one Manhattan. I'm going to make sure nothing is selected. There we go. I'm going to hit Apply. Okay. So now at the bottom it says Manhattan, and now I have a main character set. And what I want to do is when we do our walk cycle, for this one what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating one cycle of it. So we did that, if you got to that part in the Chickster, we did that in the Chickster, and then we used that cycle for something else. This one I want to be able to create a continuous loop inside here that I could animate as many times as I want, okay? When they do video games, every time they do a motion, like a character walks, that's one cycle. When he jumps, that's another cycle. When he punches someone, that's another cycle. When he does whatever, all of those are little clips that are part of cycles. In order for those to work, we have to have each area kind of bunched up under its own character set, okay? So we're going to have 3 character sets, head, upper body, and lower body, okay? So I'm going to go and just create those pretty much the same way. It's just the button below it creates sub-character sets. And this one will be called head, or head. There we go. And then upper body, and then lower body. Okay. So now if I go to Manhattan, I see head, upper body, and lower body. So right now, nothing is inside those. Maya doesn't know what to put in them. We have to tell it what to put in them. For the head one, realistically, it's probably just going to be like the neck and the eyes. That's going to be the major things you'll be moving around. You can always add stuff to these later if you forget, but you want to make sure that you have a majority of what you need. So I'm on the head one. Oh, I thought it was head. There we go. I'm going to find out what is controlling the head. So if I'm moving the head, what? I don't know why that would ever be something I would need to do. Maybe this one? No? That's a weird one. I'd probably just grab this then, I think, right? Yeah. All right, so I would grab that. That's a weird one. Okay. Probably not. So I'm going to grab all 3 rotates for this. I'm on the head character set, and I'm going to go to Key, Add to Character Set. You'll notice they turn yellow. They're now part of that character set. So what that means is without having anything at all selected, if I hit S, it will automatically set keyframes for the head. Okay? So when we get to our pose, when we get to our animation, you're going to be moving the head, the upper body, the lower body, the right hand, the left hand, each foot, the knees, the elbows, the spine, the hips, everything. If you accidentally forget to set a key on one of those, that could really set you back, okay? So this is going to bunch all those together, so we hit S, and every single thing that we have moved is going to have a keyframe on it. Now that goes against everything I've already said this semester about only set keyframes on certain things, but for a character, for your first one, that's how we're going to do it, okay? All right, so now for this, this is just turning facial controls on or off. I would never keyframe that. That's just an extra thing, okay? But what I may want to do is, where are his eye controls? Does he have eye controls? Did I turn those off? I may have. And this is why you want to make sure your rig is good, because I don't know if he has any eye controls. Oh, why would he have eye controls? His eyes are perfectly white. Okay, so I don't really need eye controls for this guy, so I'm just going to ignore eye controls. So I think that's pretty much it. If I wanted maybe his jaw to open, maybe I would grab this. Nope, that's not his jaw. I would grab this. Nope, this. There we go. So I may use that for something, right? So I'm going to click on just the rotate X, because that's the only one I think I would need. I'm on head, and I would go to add to character set. All right, so the head is the easiest one because it's typically just a few controls. If it was eyes too, I would grab the eyes, whatever moves the eyes around, I would add that. I'm going to go to upper body now and look at how the upper body is going to move. So with the way he's currently set up is FK, meaning that I grab his joints and I rotate him. It's not IK, I grab the wrist and move the wrist where I want to go. So I'm going to set that down there. Down here. Okay, so those are all both FK. One of these controls, that, somewhere on this guy, maybe the light bulb? Yes. I can change this to IK. So I typically want this as IK. For the walk cycle, I change it back, and then I will make it FK again, and then add those to the character set too. So this is how I control his wrist moving around. So I want that control, and I want this control. So I'm going to grab both of those at the same time. I'm going to go to my upper body. Yep, I'm on it. Yep. So when we do the walk cycle, we're going to just do rotate, because my arm pretty much stays locked. It's just rotating from the shoulder. It's a lot easier. I don't think I'll need that. Nope, I don't think so. Let's see what this is. This should be his collarbone. Yes. Okay. So I do want both of these, so I'm going to grab my rotates and translates. and add that in there. Remember, if you forget something, you can add it in later. The idea here is that you're understanding what it goes into all the stuff. Here's his hands, so I'm going to grab both of these, grab both of his stuff there, add that to the character set. Here's his spine, I'm going to add that to the character set. Here's this thing, whatever this is. I may need that, so I'll add all of this to the character set. Oh, look, he has a breathe one. Nice. It is weird. But that can add a lot to our character. Alright, so we'll take these ones, we'll add those to the character set. So anything that I think maybe I'll move, I want to add that to the character set. If you're not sure, add it to the character set. Okay? It doesn't hurt you to add extra stuff.
If it's added to a character set, that means we can only animate the stuff that's in that character set?
Correct.
Okay.
For this one, this is the hips. That's going to go into lower body because as the character is moving, as they take a step, their hips are going to come up. So I want to make sure that as I move the legs, I can move the hips up. So I'm not going to touch those. I think for the most part I have everything I need. If I was going to do hand animations even more, I would add each one of these in there too, so that I could rotate each one of these. But because he has this, which is basically a curl or a scrunch, I have plenty of things that for what we're going to do I'm going to need. When I get to my actual animation, I will probably add those in there because it's a lot more intricate for me to get my character to grab something like this. It may not fit within curl or scrunch. His hand may be like this for curl, not like that. Or if I need him to pick up something like that, or however, I need to make sure that I have control over all those things. Now again, it's not a huge deal either if I marqueed all of these.
And those little, like, dots above the fingers, are those the controls?
Yep, those are all the ways that you could just control each one of the fingers. And I could just grab all of these, and I'll do the same thing on the side. Like if you don't want to do it later, you can just add it now. It'll just be extra stuff to look at later. Okay. Then I'm going to go to lower body. It seems like it, but it's once you go through, it'll definitely save you some time later. Okay, you're basically just adding stuff that you would animate. Okay, so this one here, look at, I know that this is how I move the foot. So I'm going to grab everything that's in here like that. And because the other foot's probably the exact same way, I'll grab both of things. I'm on lower body now. I'll go to key. I'll add that to the character set. Sweet. There's hips. I'm going to add that to the character set. I don't have any knee aimers, which I thought I would have knee aimers with this one. Apparently not. He might have something else. Yep, he just has a rotate. Well, that's weird. So, yeah, that's weird that he doesn't have a knee aimer. Usually they do. Whatever. Alright, so that works there. Cool. So that should be it. So I have the hips for the feet. I have the feet controls down here. I don't need this one. I will never animate this feature right here in a loop. That wouldn't make sense. I would never animate something in here as part of that loop. Okay. So now his lower body is set up, and his upper body is set up, and his head is set up. As we were adding stuff in the outliner, you'll see there's Manhattan, there's head. Here's all the stuff that's on head. Here's lower body. Here's all the stuff that's on lower body. There's upper body. This one's going to be more. There's all the stuff that's on upper body. Okay? So this is going to be this is the cool thing about this. Let me save this so I don't ruin it. If I switch this to any one of these, so I switch it to Manhattan, and when I hit S, it's going to say result 178 keys because it went through and set 178 keyframes on every single thing that I had selected in that group. Okay? Plus, because I had this selected, it set keyframes there for whatever. So let me delete that keyframe. And then let me go to upper body and hit S, and now it sets 138 keyframes. Okay, just the stuff on upper body. When I switch this to lower body and I hit S, now it sets 36. Now because all of these are working basically on layers, I can see all of them at the same time. So if my character is in a certain pose and I want to move that whole pose, all the keyframes are in that one spot. I can move it over. I don't have to worry about grabbing all these specific items. Okay? So just trust me if you don't know what's going on. This is the awesomest thing in the world when it comes to animation. Okay, sweet. All right, so now he's all set up. Now he's actually ready to be used in scenes. Okay, so all of that work is everything we need to do to make sure that he is ready to go. And that's why we label our file ready to go.
If I wanted to move, like, say, his arm or something, I would have to click that particular key set.
If you wanted to move his arm, okay, so let's say we wanted to animate his arm moving. Okay, so I want to be on upper body, so I'm not setting keyframes for anything on the lower body. Okay, so I'm going to have him, in this case, I'll have him kind of turn and then backhand or something, okay? So I'm going to go here and I'm going to move his, I'll just put his hands down because it looks kind of weird. It looks weird still. There we go. And then we'll take these two and we'll rotate these down too a little bit more. There you go. A little bit more relaxed. Good. Okay. So that's where I want him to start. So I'm going to hit S to say that's where you're starting. And because all of those controls that I just clicked are all on the same character set, all of them get a keyframe. I don't have to worry about I forgot to select this one or I forgot to select that one. Everything gets a keyframe. Then I can go up to, let's say, 20. And I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to lift it up, pull it forward. It's too far forward. I'm going to grab his elbow control, pull this back so his elbow's sticking out of his arm, or out of his body. And let's see what else. You should probably make a fist here. And because he's doing that, we'll just rotate this a little bit forward. Rotate that one back a little bit. This back a little bit. That needs to come out a bit more. Do you see all the things that I'm touching? All of those and more are things that you will touch every single time you need to put your character into a pose. Okay, so now he has his hand like that. I'm going to hit S. It sets keys on all those things that I just selected. Not because I selected them, because they're part of the character set. Okay, so now when I go from here to here, everything animates as it should. One pose, the second pose. So now when he goes to his next one, which is, I'm assuming 30, because he's probably going to smack someone with 10 frames worth of energy. Go there. We'll take this. Oops, not scrunch it up. I'm going to take the spread in a little bit like that. Okay. And then I'm resetting basically all of his controls because now he's spinning the opposite direction. So all of his stuff will now be weighted the other way. A little too shouldery, right? Actually, I'm going to go like that. And then I'm going to go up a couple more frames. Push a little bit forward. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now all of those controls, obviously that's a little bit too slow when he does his backhanding this. All those controls that I set a keyframe on are all locked to 35 right now. Because they're all part of the character set, because I'm selected on the character set, everything is right there. I don't need to worry about reselecting everything to move it. It's right here. I grab the keyframe, I scoot it down a couple frames. There we go. Now the timing is much better. This could be a little bit sped up too, so I'll scoot that down. There we go. Good. I could even copy keyframes, and when I copy it, it's copying the entire thing. So let's say I wanted him to hold for a couple frames. There we go. Okay. So that's the whole purpose of making sure we have these character sets, so very easily we can put our character in a pose, set a key, and then move on to the next pose without having to deal with a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Now when we go to the graph editor, whoopsie, here's all the things that we just set keyframes on. So some of these are not going to move. That's fine. Most of the stuff that we care about is going to be really obvious, all of these kind of movements here. We're not going to spend too much time in the graph editor with this assignment, only if there's an issue where we need to tweak something or we need to adjust the speed of something. Okay? So typically going from pose to pose to pose is what we have time for. Going into the graph editor and doing other stuff is just, we don't have that much time. Okay? So we'll tweak things a little bit, especially when we get to do the walk cycle, but when we do our actual animation, we won't. Okay? Sweet. So now I will save this as backhanded just so I don't ruin my ready to go. So my ready to go one is something I never want to actually work off of. I open it, I save it as something else, and then that's what I use as my starting point. So if I'm ready for my first actual part of the assignment, I'll open up ready to go. Yes, that's fine. Yes, that's fine. There shouldn't be anything mental ray. Oh, no, these are all deleted. That's fine. These are all files. No, one of these might be. I don't know. This is all. Oops, I should have shown that. These are all the expressions and stuff that they're using to control their guy. So all of this, scrolling down all the way here, all of these are different things that they've used to rig their character on top of set driven, on top of connection editor, on top of other scripting things, on top of all the other stuff that we played with. Sweet. So now I'm ready for my first actual part of the assignment. I'm going to save this as pose number 1. Pose. Yes, I know, I forgot to do that. Sweet. Okay. So as your first part of the assignment, or your first assignment in the character, you're going to be posing your character in a pose that shows off that shows off a dynamic movement of the character as a still frame. Okay, so this isn't an animation. This is simply you getting used to the character and getting them into poses. The walk cycle, it's an animation, but it's pose, pose, pose. So we need to know how to set poses first. Okay, so look up dynamic poses. You can type dynamic poses. You can look up something very specific. Do not use drawings, do not use animations, use actual reference from photos. And the reason for that is this stuff here may not be how a person can actually position themselves. So you want to get something like this because it's much better reference for how someone can actually pose themselves. Okay? So this is a dynamic pose. This is a dynamic pose. So that you can get used to the controls. So you can get used to how do I get my character to do this kind of stuff. Because when we get to our walk cycle, you need to know how to move the legs into the right spots. When we get to our animation, you need to know how to make them curl into a ball or whatever. So these are dynamic poses. If you're not sure of what is a dynamic pose, if you simply outlined the person with like completely black and you just had a silhouette of it, would you be able to see kind of what the person is doing? And would that have some sort of motion to it? Okay? A non-dynamic pose is something like this. There we go. Perfect. That is a non-dynamic pose. There's no motion. The person is standing perfectly still. It's a pretty boring looking pose. Boring. This is why Google is so awesome. Boring poses. These are also boring poses. There's not action there. The person is just literally standing right there. These are boring poses. Boring poses. There's a boring pose. Okay, something with action, something with movement inside it. That's why we like these ones. So you'll find a common thread. Dance photos, ballet photos, yoga photos, karate photos. Those have dynamic poses. Sports, anything football, basketball. You can find stuff like that. Boxing. Okay, not like this. That's a boring pose. Something like that could work. You can actually use, because you have to have 3 poses, you could find a scene with 3 different people all doing dynamic poses and put them together in one scene. That is a possibility to do as well. When you find your reference, you will be turning in your reference and you'll be turning in a rendered image of your pose. I want to make sure that you have good reference. Make sure you have a full scale or a full image of your person. Something like this is not good because we can't see the feet, we can't see the knees. I want you to see the feet, I want you to see the knees.
How many references do we need to have?
How many photos are you going to do? 3. So you'll have 3 images, or 2 images, depending on what you find. Right? Here's a dynamic pose. Now obviously find something big. This guy's a dynamic pose, this guy isn't. Okay? Oops. And obviously I have to make sure I word this right. The tighter the clothing, the easier it is to see what the body is doing. If their clothing is too baggy, it's very difficult to see what they're doing. So, jujitsu poses. I spelled jujitsu wrong. So in jujitsu, let's see. No, I'm not really seeing anything. In some of these karate outfits, their outfits are so baggy you can't see what the legs and the knees and the feet are doing. Don't use those poses, okay? There you go. There's 2 dynamic poses right there. One guy's kind of arched back, and this guy's like pulling on his arm. He's not actually pulling on his arm. He doesn't look like he's, emphasizing that a bit more. A bit. All right. So make sure you find good poses. So let's pretend that I found a good pose here. Try that one. Okay. So something like this can work. You can use something like this. You may need to, and this may sound silly, you may need to get into the pose to understand what things are doing if you can't see them. I can't see what this back leg is doing. I can kind of guess her knee is pointed this way and her thigh is probably going straight like that. But some of these poses you may not be able to see from the angle that you're seeing. So it may help you to actually get into the pose. Animators will do this all the time. They will actually get into the character and act out as the character. Detour over to YouTube real quick. Bit easier. Okay. So looking at this area here, I'm going to basically just try to rotate his hips. So his hips are in alignment with where her hips are. And again, I'm ignoring all the silliness that is happening around him. It's just a matter of where those hips are at. Your character may not have the flexibility of the same character you're trying to emulate. Oops, and this is pretty even with this. It's just over here. And then the same thing there. See how I went to the feet now, because the feet are important to make sure she's grounded. If I don't get the hips right, and I don't get the feet right, I can't get the hands in the right spots, okay? The character should look as balanced as the reference you're trying to go off of. There's a lot of times where people will get the pose, and then as they start to move around it, it looks totally unnatural, like there's no way that person could be holding that pose like that. Okay? That's ridiculous. Alright, so that foot is there. Oops, this is really far out. Like, this is straight. Okay, and because I can't see where her foot is in relationship to her, I'm going to assume that it's further over this way. And maybe even rotate it a bit like that. Okay, and maybe even scrunched in just a tiny bit more. Okay. Now I do need to go to the channel box for this because I need to get the toes up on there. So I'm going to go to that control. I'm going to go to toe pivot, I believe this one is. Nope. Toe roll. There we go. So a little bit of toe roll and a little bit of, I think, foot roll. Yep, maybe a little bit too much toe roll there. Let's put that down a little bit. And maybe even a little bit of rotation in there. Okay, so now I'm going to bring the foot up there. Okay, I'm looking at the hips. I'm looking at the legs. All right, I'm looking at it from other angles to see if this works. I think this should probably be rotated just a hair more that way. And because I did that, then this needs to come over a bit more. I may need to scoot his body up some too. I think he seems a little bit low. Alright, that's good. Now I'm going to arch the back some. So I'm going to grab this. And see how I'm working from the center out. I'm not touching the arms yet. The arms still look ridiculous. So does his face. I don't know what happened. I don't know. So I'm arching the back. I'm rounding the back. I'm going to grab this head controller and rotate it. It does look weird. Pull it back like this and pull it back like that. Okay, if I want to move the head, it doesn't look like... Oh, those two controls I said, why am I going to use these? There we go. That's why I would use those. So now I'm going to take these two, or three, and I'm just going to drop them into my head character set. And then I'll make a note on a piece of paper, add those to my character set, because I actually may need those for instances like this. Alright, so that looks good. Now I know his arm is going to have to come down like that, so I need to make sure that as his body is angled, that he's up enough where his arm can be basically straight on the ground. So I'm going to grab his torso again, and he is really distorted in here. Let me unstretch this a little bit. Let me crank that up like that a little bit. There we go. And then I'm just going to start placing his arms where I think they're going to go. Most likely they're going to be adjusted later on. Let me reset some of these. Some of these, if they get crazy, it's very difficult to control the hand. So I'm going to rotate that some more. Rotate that. Okay, now I have an idea of where the ground is. I have an idea of where his hand is. I probably need to adjust his curl a little bit. I may need to adjust each of his fingers too. So I guess it's a good thing I have those controls on there. And this is right under his shoulder. Like that. So his hips need to come up a lot more. There we go. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to throw this one way in the air above him. So you'll find that this part is going to take you a few minutes to do. Ideally, you should be able to get your first pose maybe in 2 hours, your second pose in an hour, and then your last pose should take you about a half hour to do. That way, by the time you get to your actual animation in your walk cycle, these things are like super quick. 5 minutes, 10 minutes on a pose, and then you're on to the next one. That may seem ridiculous, but that's how long it takes. There. I'll bend here. I should go to these there and kind of crank that up a little bit. And crank this up a little bit. Now he doesn't have as many controls as the Andy rig does for his spine. He basically has like a rotator and that's it. This one here I could probably rotate some there and rotate this back here a little bit. There we go. All right, and those hips I think need to come back and rotate just a bit more. All right, now if I had the Homer rig, which I've used before, there's no way the Homer rig would be able to get into this pose. His legs are just too short and thick, and it wouldn't work. So in that case, what you do is you just try to get him in as close as you can to Homer getting into that pose. Let's go further here. Let's go pull this down. I'm going to move that elbow control there, move this elbow control here. So you can see how I'm moving around the whole pose to look at the character. And now as I look at it, this pose looks pretty doable. This leg needs to come in just a bit more. Watch how the legs pop. Some of them don't stretch, they just like lock out. So you want to make sure that there's just a little bit of give there. Alright, so this pose seems pretty possible. It feels like the weight is on this hand. That's what it should feel like because that's what it looks like here. Now, is it an exact replica of that pose? No, but it's pretty close. This heel could be rotated a bit more that way, and this could come down some more. Okay, I'm not looking for you to get it exact. Like, some people will go through the hassle of loading the image as a background image and then trying to match up the character. Don't do that. Use your eye to be able to look at that image and then try to replicate it here. Okay, so that's pretty close to it. I could probably and should probably tweak that a bit more. Now once you get to this point where you're like, cool, that's the pose that I want to do, you'll create a ground, you'll create lights if you need them, and then the easy points are just rendering it out like that. Okay, so I'll assign a material to his ground. Let's see. Nope, I forgot to turn off his glowing belt. I want to make sure it, because it just lets you know what is controllable. I have to grab it off of his feet too, and his wrist. So they may even have a group. So I'm hitting the up arrow to see if it's grouped somewhere. Yep, right there. There we go. So as I render this, I want to make sure that he does have contact. If he's supposed to be touching the ground, he's touching the ground. This foot is not touching the ground. This hand is touching the ground, but his thumb is through it. I'd want to fix that. This foot is touching the ground perfectly. That hand is up in the air. I could probably tweak that a bit. Okay. Now that looks awfully odd compared to my reference image, so I'm going to angle my camera just a bit more like that. Just so it's a bit closer to my reference image. I would turn the stuff back on, move the foot back down here. I'd go into the fingers and make sure that the hand feels like it's planted versus this where it's like cutting through the ground. Okay, if I look at that line that we talked about, I have pretty much that line. I think this needs to come this way and that way.
Are you able to rotate the wrist?
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what you're doing with this assignment is you're understanding how to control it. How do I move things around and get them into these poses? Alright, so that's... dang it. Go to my attributes here. I'll find a way to turn those off automatically. Alright, so there's my first pose. So what I need to do for the turn-in part of this is that I need to render this out at 2400 by 3000 or 3000 by 2400. So more wide than tall, so I would go 3000 by 2400. I would turn on my render region. I'd zoom in really close to him. And then I would render this out, and then I would just go to File, Save, and I would save that image. Pose number 1 is done. When you turn it in, you're turning in pose number 1, and you're turning in the image that you use. So obviously I need to save this image and submit that, or show me that when we are looking at the grading stuff. You can add depth of field to these if you want these to look a bit more, especially in the rendering class. All those same tricks, ambient occlusion, all that stuff, you could still add to this to make them look more complete, more like images. If you see a few of those that are on the wall up there, like the dance one, all 3 of those dance ones are in a dance studio, and there's actually a reflection of the person watching them in the mirror. I don't know if you can see it from there.
How would you add the ambient occlusion? Because you said, I know it doesn't have occlusion on that.
It does. I'll show that in a second. It's almost done. Yeah, obviously make sure it still looks good. You know, you don't want to... You're using your time for valuable stuff here, not wasting it. I hit escape. There we go. Okay, so if you want ambient occlusion, you'll go to your render settings. You'll go to your AOVs. And then, you'll go to add a custom one, ambient occlusion. It's not built in. You have to create it yourself. It's weird. And then you'll select the AOV. And then you'll go to default shader, ambient occlusion. And I'll pull the samples up. So what I should get now is that when I render this in Arnold, one of my passes here will be ambient occlusion, and then I can use that to multiply on top of there. Now he looks pretty doughy in this one. I probably need to take my far clipping, there it is, far clipping down, so it doesn't do that. Or take the spread down, that might be the other option. Take that to 10. Yep. So now I have more of that dark area here and the whiter area there. Okay, then I would just multiply that on top of the image in Photoshop. Good to go. Sweet. Okay, so I would save this as pose 1. I would reopen up ready to go. Yes, I know that. Yes, I know that still. I would re-add those ones that I found before, so maybe those neck roll ones, whatever those were.
I gotta drop off the shorter one here.
I think those are the only ones I had. I'd add those to the character set. Yep. Same character, different poses. Okay. So then I would save this as pose 2. Pose 2. And then I would go and find my second pose, and I would set up my second pose the same way I set up my first pose, whatever it is. If you're using multiple characters in one scene, there we go, gorgeous. You would just make a new file, import your rig, and then import your rig again. And what you'll get is you'll get actually 2 character sets. One will be called Manhattan, the next one we call Manhattan 01 or something. You can just rename them whatever you want. Okay, so then you could just pose them as just like that, or you could render them out separately, put them together in Photoshop, whatever you want to do with that. Okay, let me open up that Andy one just so you can see what the stuff looks like in there, because their stuff is going to be just slightly different than this one. It's technically all the same, but just slightly different. So in the outliner, Andy has this Andy All. Those are his character sets. You do not want to use these because they suck. You want to delete them, and then you want to start off with your own character sets when you get to that point. When you get to Andy's materials, you'll see all the materials that Andy has in his rig. If I click on his skin and then I graph this out, that's what his skin looks like. Now the reason it looks like that is because on the Andy rig, I can choose whichever skin color I want for Andy. So if I wanted to wear a blue shirt, it's simply reloading in a blue shirt material. So all of these are not loaded all the time. All of these are simply loaded when you change options. So for something like the Andy rig, this is another way you can assign your materials. If I go to my layers and I unreference this, because the Andy rig by default does not allow you to select the geometry, so I unreference it, then I can. I would just grab a new material. I would go to my Arnold shader and I would map in a file. And then the file I would pick in here, in this case because it's the Andy rig, is I would go into his source images and I would find whichever color outfit I want Andy to wear. So if I want girl skull, I grab girl skull. Okay. Now when I do that, this circle on the bottom, that does not work for all of this stuff over here anymore. So I can still change the hair because that's not texture. Okay. I can still change the chest because that's not texture. But as far as clothing goes, this doesn't work anymore. Okay, because I overrode that by assigning my own material to the Andy rig. Okay, but I would still need to go through everything else. Here's his skin. That one doesn't matter anymore because I already took care of that. Here's skin shader. That's still part of that skin. I'm going to delete the unused stuff. There we go. Here's his clothes. We don't really need that. Here's his cornea, which is the clear part of his eye. Here's his eyeball, which is the other part of his eye. Here's his pupil. So you see how Andy has 4 parts. There's his iris. 4 parts just for his eyeball. Here's his tongue, teeth, hair. Another hair one. Another hair one. Okay. So depending on your rig, you may have lots of materials. You may have very little materials. You may have stuff in your outliner that you need to delete. You may not have stuff in your outliner you need to delete. If you're unsure, I just walked you through how to do Manhattan, so do Manhattan. Okay? That way you can see exactly, that's what he did, that's what I'm going to do. Okay? Sweet. Alright, any questions on the character poses? Lecture.
So we don't have to do drawings for this week?
Right, we're done with drawings. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is that the same one as the last class?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But it's better because it's this class. Alright, I'll be around in 2 seconds. Let me get this uploaded.
I don't have any drawings right now. I'm going to have to show you next week.
Show me next week or Wednesday? Which one?
Well, you said you weren't going to be here anyway.
I said in the morning I'd be